Hello, welcome into WLOY, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOY.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle, Loyola's premier sports talk radio show, airing every Monday from 3 to 4 p.m. and every Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Welcome back. It's been 10 days since our last show. We're back from spring break, but it's good to be back in the studio talking to sports. And we have a lot to get through today, but first, I'll introduce ourselves. My name is Jeffrey Bazzi, and I am alongside my co-host Jimmy Cody. Jimmy, how's everything going today? And how was your spring break?
Yeah, my spring break was really good, but we got to talk about the Aaron Rodgers news. We got to get right into this right now because Trey Wingo is reporting he was traded. Now, Ian Rappaport just tweeted a minute ago that it did not happen. So we got absolute madness right now in NFL free agency. And that's pretty much what the first half of this show is going to be. But is Rodgers a Jet or not? That is still the question at the end of the day. Trey Wingo, if you reported that and you got that wrong, that's really bad. You would probably take the new, I would say, title for worst sports tweet of the year over John Heyman for saying arson judge to the Jets.
I was going to say, we've seen this movie before with Aaron Judge.
And it's also unacceptable, by the way, to do that. It's just ridiculous. But, I mean, NFL free agency is crazy. If Aaron Rodgers is a Jet, that is a significant piece of news for the entire NFL, right, Jeffrey? I mean, think about it. The Jets have always presented themselves recently as a team who's a quarterback away. They have a pretty good young defense. They got Garrett Wilson. They have some veterans on the O-line, but pretty much the missing piece of the puzzle is always quarterback. And for them, they are just in the Rodgers waiting period, right? That's the best way to describe it. Is he going to be a Jet? Is he not going to be a Jet? I'll say this for the Packers' point of view. I feel like they're ready to move on.
Oh, they're definitely ready to go into the Jordan Love era. Definitely. They've said it themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I would not be surprised at the same time, because I don't know if you saw this tweet. Russell Douglas, who plays for the Packers, he's a corner. He was saying how the players want Aaron Rodgers back. And I could almost see him kind of feeding into that with his ego, because he does have a big ego, right? Like, we know that Aaron Rodgers is a little bit of a character. That's the one thing that everybody kind of notices. And the fact that he liked that tweet, I could totally see him wanting to come back and be the quote unquote savior. Because listen, the one thing we remember with Favre, he did not want to leave. He did not want the next guy to come in. And the same can be said for Aaron Rodgers. And it's kind of funny that both of their possibly next teams after their great careers with the Packers could be the New York Jets. The only thing is, Brett Favre as a New York Jet was not very memorable, at least not for anybody else, but maybe for Jet fans, that's for sure. Because was a season that looked like it had some promise early. Then he got injured, and then they never were able to make the playoffs. They went 9-7. But at the same time, bringing Aaron Rodgers in is something that would excite anybody. And listen,
it's a
Jets
huge
fans have a reason to be excited.
Oh, no doubt they do. I mean, you mentioned the defense. You mentioned Garrett Wilson. You mentioned the, I don't know, just up and coming vibe of the team. But to get Rodgers, that would be a seismic change, not just for him, but for the Jets, because they'd finally be putting themselves back in the map as saying, hey, we're actually here, we're for real. But yeah, I don't know if he's a Jet, because you said that he was a Jet and then all of a sudden he's not a Jet. I don't know. This is just crazy. And he did say that the decision would not take very long. He said that a few days ago. So I guess right now this is kind of his decision being made public. But some of these Jet players, they've been tweeting over the last 10 minutes. I saw a tweet from Garrett Wilson from 2:59 p.m. He said, I can finally enjoy my vacay now.
Yeah, but I mean, that still doesn't, we don't know if this is 100% or not.
And I haven't heard anything from Schefter or Rappaport or anywhere.
Rappaport's saying no.
So you said no, okay.
Rappaport has sources with Aaron Rodgers. Remember, he's the guy who broke it last year. He has also broken plenty of Jets news in the past. So that's kind of like where he fits in. Those are two teams that he would definitely have the scoop on. And for him to not be saying that, and we have seen this in the past too, like you brought up the Aaron Judge situation, but in the NFL we've seen this too. Let us not forget the whole Antonio Brown was going to the Bills situation. Remember when that was a thing? And Ian Rappaport was actually the guy who was wrong that day. But it's kind of funny. We got to kind of let this play out now. And also, it's kind of annoying that we have to wait just because we got guys who are supposed to be figures in media who are supposed to have the actual scoop, and then they're tweeting this out, and then there's conflicting reports, and I don't know, very annoying process, but the saga continues. I mean, didn't I sit here and say I bet that we would not have a decision by the time we did our next show?
You did say that.
We almost thought we did, but then in comes Ian Rappaport to prove Jimmy Cody right.
Right at the deadline.
Right at the deadline. Right at the deadline. I thought you were going to start off the show by saying it, and I was going to have to be like, no, 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 because that's pretty much where we're at right now. And for the Jets fans, it's like they're being pulled one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else is going to happen. I mean, I do think that, I don't know. I was going to say that I would think the trade would go through. I mean, we've been hearing about the Rodgers to the Jets thing for the last week or so. We've been hearing that, hey, the Jets are becoming closer and closer. They flew out in person to meet with Rodgers and his representatives. It just sounded like it was so inevitable. And now, I don't know, the fact that it was reported that it was done and now it's kind of hanging in the balance up in the air. I don't even know who to believe. I don't even know what to think anymore. I don't know. It's confusing.
So when it comes to Rodgers, it's pretty much just a wait and see approach. The whole entire NFL, I feel like, is being essentially held hostage by Aaron Rodgers. We're just waiting here on his time to see what decision he's going to make. Is it retirement? Is it the Green Bay Packers? Which I would say right now looks like the least likely of the group. I would think that he's either retirement or Jets.
So let's just say the trade does go through and he is a New York Jet. I mean, you're looking now at not just the Jets, but the landscape of the AFCs. I mean, you're going to have 2 meetings a year with Rodgers and Josh Allen. I mean, that's going to be a storyline. You saw what the Dolphins did?
Yeah.
They made a big move yesterday. They got Jalen Ramsey in a trade from the Rams, and we've seen them kind of compete last year. They were in the playoffs.
When they have Tua, to make the case, they're as good as anybody in the AFC.
Yeah, and they've got 2 very dynamic wide receivers, and they upgraded the defense, like I said, with Ramsey, and they have Bradley Chubb, who they acquired from the Broncos, and
Christian Wilkins.
they're trying to get better on that end of the ball.
And
So they're definitely making moves.
They also added Vic Fangio as their DC, their defensive coordinator, who I have to say, when he was with the Broncos, I was really impressed with his defensive coaching. As a head coach, not great, but certainly a guy who knows how to coach defense. He was with the Bears when they had that resurgence with Khalil Mack. So this is a guy who can coach, and they're a team that's definitely positioned well too. So the Jets are going to have their hands full, right?
Right.
The Dolphins are a good team. The Bills are a good team. The AFC East is going to be playing the AFC West this year. So they're going to have to play the Chiefs. They're going to have to play the Chargers. They're going to have to play another team who made a move today. How about the Raiders? They got Jimmy Garoppolo to pair up with Devontae Adams and Josh Jacobs and Josh McDaniels. That's going to be an interesting kind of tandem there. I would not be surprised if that team was a lot better this year.
Yeah, I think it's a great move to obviously, you would think it's a slight upgrade from Carr.
I would think it's an upgrade, especially because there's more familiarity there between McDaniels and Garoppolo.
Yeah. And you put him with Devontae Adams, you think that'd be a good pairing?
Devontae Adams and anybody could be a good pairing.
Yeah. But I'll go back to the Dolphins. They also signed Mike White, who is not going to be a starter because they have Tua Tagovailoa, but I think it's a great insurance policy to have because you saw last year, Mike White came in when Zach Wilson was either hurt or not playing well. And I thought, did a pretty respectable job. He won a few games, kind of kept the Jets afloat for the most part. So I think that's a great deal. And to get 16 million, I mean, that's not cheap for a backup, but I think
2 years.
But for 2 years and for Mike White, I think it's a great deal for him.
Yeah, it's not entirely guaranteed. I think only a portion of it is, but he's still getting a decent chunk of change for a guy who was, until last year, looked like pretty much a journeyman with no chance in the league. And he's kind of found a way to, revitalize his career a little bit. Or I don't know if it's revitalized or kind of just get it going, but good for him. He kind of found a path. And listen, there's no doubt that he was the best Jets quarterback last year on that roster. So he's going to a place in Miami where I think the coaching's a little bit better on offense too. So if he does get in the game for Tua for whatever reason, I think he could be very successful down there. And also too, while we're on the topic of the Dolphins, they picked up Tua's 5th-year option. So Tua is going to be making a lot less than Daniel Jones. He's only been making in the 20s. I think it's about 25 million for his 5th year. You could say at this point in time for Tua's production, if he has a full year and is successful, and he's an MVP candidate player like he was last year, that contract is a steal. 25 million for a quarterback, that's cheap right now.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's so many other moves though. I'm looking here.
Let's just talk about the quarterbacks right now. I mean, we obviously mentioned Garoppolo, but we'd be remiss if we did not mention Derek Carr going to the Saints.
Yeah, and that happened a few days ago while we were on break. But what do you think of that move? Because I feel like it's definitely an upgrade for the Saints, but I don't know. Do you think it's really going to make them that much better? I mean, I think it could. I think Derek Carr going to somewhere new, I think is going to be good for him.
Absolutely.
I'm just trying to picture it.
They got playmakers. It kind of reminds me of this very similar situation to what he had in Las Vegas. I'm sorry, not Los Angeles. Great receivers. Chris Olave is pretty good. Michael Thomas, when healthy, can play. A decent running back, obviously. Alvin Kamara, Josh Jacobs, very similar. The O line, I would say, is probably a little bit better for the Saints. My only question is offensive coaching. I'm not crazy about what the Saints did on offense last year. It felt always like an offense that was never in sync. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on Derek Carr to kind of be the reason that they have a bounce back year. And I just don't know if he's 100% capable of that. If he is, I think they can very easily win the division because it's not like the NFC South is the hardest division in sports right now. That can certainly not be said. I mean, the Bucks, we don't really know what they're doing. The Panthers are straight up for the number one pick. We'll get into that in a little bit, but they're also a team who's kind of on the rise, but still lacking some offensive talent in some spots. And then that leaves the Saints, and then it leaves the Falcons. I would say any of those four teams could win that.
Yeah, they
division.
could, and they've all made moves or they have to make moves. I mean, you look at the Saints, they signed Carr. The Falcons, they traded for Jonnu Smith. I don't know if you saw that earlier.
Yeah, but I mean,
It's not really a too
I would
big of a
expect
notable
bigger
move.
moves coming from that. I wouldn't be surprised if they drafted a quarterback.
Yeah,
Unless they're going to ride with Ritter, which I guess is possible because he didn't have any turnovers last year. So I guess that's a reason
yeah,
to bring
cheap
back
option
Ritter,
too. Yeah. You're looking at Carolina. I mean, we'll talk about the number one pick later, but that's a big move and kind of sends a message that they probably don't believe in the QBs they have.
Well, they didn't really
It's
have
kind of confusing.
anybody long term, right? So they traded for Darnold. Never really worked out. PJ Walker from the XFL had some moments where it looked good, but then they had some moments where it was eh. But realistically, they also had Baker Mayfield at one point last year, right? That didn't really work out. But at this point in time, the really only other option was Sam Darnold. And let's talk about that trade now, honestly. Let's just work right into it. There's no sense of keeping it waiting anymore. I think for Carolina, if they nail the pick, then I don't think that will be a bad idea, that trade at all. It really comes down to what they do
agree.
with the selection.
Yeah, if they clearly think that there's someone at number one that they love and they could see playing for the Panthers for a long time, I think it's so worth it.
Yeah. My only concern, though, is, and this is fair just because of the trade they made, who is he going to throw the ball to? Because they literally have Terrace Marshall and like Shi Smith and Tommy Tremble. That's like the two wide receivers and the tight end that I can think of. They don't really have too much offensively. Now, I'll say this. They have a pretty good O-line. So if they get someone like CJ Stroud, who, I think has a lot of talent, I think has a very good chance of being the first overall pick. If they got someone like him, combined it with Frank Reich's coaching, because obviously we've seen Frank Reich can coach like offensive talent. We've seen him succeed with a guy like Carson Wentz in Philadelphia, and he still had a pretty good season with him in Indy. Obviously, the last game he was completely scapegoated and was ran out of town for his poor performance. So be it. Carson Wentz doesn't really look like much anyway. This is the number one overall pick, and with a young quarterback, I think Frank Reich can do something. It just sucks that they gave up DJ Moore because he was a very good receiver.
He was probably the most proven guy on that receiving corps for sure.
Oh, by far and away.
Yeah.
You could make a case he was the best player on the team.
Yeah, and that's how sad the situation was.
Yeah.
And despite all that, they almost won the NFC South.
Yes, and they were a train wreck earlier in the season when you thought about it.
They really were. And then there was another interesting thing I saw, and I don't know if you saw this, Jimmy, but it relates to actually Baker Mayfield. We brought him up how he played for the Panthers last year before he went to the Rams. Baker Mayfield was actually rumored to go to Tampa Bay. I don't know if you saw that. I mean, what did you think of that? Because I think that could be a decent move. I mean, you give him another shot at a starting job, and Tampa does need a QB. Now, they could still try to win with the roster they have because they still have a pretty decent roster.
I don't know. I think it's really tough for the Bucks. They're in like that middle ground, right? We always talk about that. What's their direction? They kind of have an older veteran roster, and the problem is they're paying a lot of guys on their defense, and they're just not playing well. So it's like, what do you do with that? Like, if you're already committed to them, you need them to be better. So, and that's something that a lot of NFL teams could say. There's plenty of guys across the board who can improve. I mean, Derek Carr is going to need to improve. Russell Wilson's going to need to improve. Then the names are endless, right? There's so many guys across the league who want to play better. But when it comes down to them, is like, I don't think Baker Mayfield's the worst option at quarterback at all. They have some talented wide receivers, like you mentioned. They got Mike Evans. They got Chris Godwin. The problem is the O-line. O-line was really bad last year. And they tried to make some moves and it didn't really work out. Now they also had some injuries. But at the same time, those other spots where there weren't injuries, where they just didn't have guys who were up to par, what do you do about that? I feel like that's kind of the reasoning for bringing in a Baker Mayfield and not just throwing Kyle Trask out there to just die to the Wolves, essentially, because that may happen with that offensive line. I mean, we saw how much Brady struggled last year, and he's the greatest quarterback of all time.
Yeah, it's a big loss for sure. I think you got to shore up the O-line, number one, but I don't know. I guess bringing Mayfield in wouldn't be the worst thing. It's just you're right. They're in that middle ground. They're kind of in a weird spot because they're coming off a Super Bowl a few years ago and they've kind of had a slow decline, but they still made the playoffs the last 2 years. I mean, I don't know. They're in a weird spot. They could try Trask, but I would go with Mayfield. He's just a better option. I mean, we've seen Mayfield when healthy too. I forget what season it was. Either 2020 or 2021. I think it was 2020.
He was very good. 2018, he was pretty good.
Yeah, I know last year was kind of, I don't know, inconsistent because he went to Carolina, didn't really work, and then he went to LA and played a little bit, but he's getting some experience out there. But I think when healthy, he's not afraid to sling it. And when you have Evans and Godwin on the outside, I mean, that's a nice thing to have.
Certainly, I think if they got Baker Mayfield, it would bring them closer to winning the division than if they had Kyle Trask. I just have a lot of questions about the Bucs because I don't really think that they have a proven head coach. Todd Bowles isn't a great option. There's just a lot of question marks there too with the defense, with the cap situation, with the veteran presence that they have on their team. It's like, how much longer are some of these guys going to stay? Especially with the cap situation, you want to get younger anyway because it just looks like a team that's on the decline, like we're saying. So I don't know, a lot of question marks there. But point is, that NFC South is wide open, and I think for a team like the Panthers, it's worth taking a risk and finding a franchise quarterback now because the division really doesn't have any young up and coming quarterbacks. Carr's older. What are the Bucs doing? I don't know. What are the Falcons doing? Not really that sure. Like Ritter, Trask, those are question marks.
Yeah.
And honestly, if they get a guy who really flourishes, the Carolina Panthers, I'm talking about, then they could be really successful over the next couple of years.
All it takes is one player. That's all it is.
And also for the people who, and this was the approach that I had when I first saw the trade, right? So it's 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and then DJ Moore, and then it was a later round pick. I think it was a day 3 pick.
Yeah, I think so.
My first concern when I saw that, I said, they gave up DJ Moore. Who's he going to throw the ball to? But as I thought about it the rest of the week, I'll say this. I think it's a lot easier to find wide receiver 1 than it is to find QB 1.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, at the end of the day, that's why if you're the Panthers, make that trade.
Now, I'm curious who they would pick at the top, assuming they're taking a QB, whether it's Bryce Young or CJ Stroud.
Or Anthony Richardson.
I mean, we've seen CJ Stroud kind of shoot up out of nowhere. I think he might be now the odds-on favorite to be the #1 pick, and it's been Bryce Young, I think, for a little while. But, yeah, I wonder who they like, one over the other. I don't know.
I mean, there's even rumors from The Athletic that the Panthers could consider trading down, which I think they're just looking for a move that would absolutely blow them away. And I think they're also trying to see if Texans will maybe bite because the Texans were rumored to be interested in the #1 pick, which weird when you consider it. But I guess if you want a specific guy, you're going to have to trade up for him, right? Because you have the second choice. Like say they prefer Bryce Young over CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson over whoever, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that's an interesting dynamic because they're at #2 because they could just sit back and be like, oh, well, if they take the one guy, we'll just let the other guy fall in our lap. But I don't know.
Specific guy that
they like Stroud, for example, over Young. I mean, if they want to pull the trigger and go to 1, I mean, I think they would do it. I mean, I think these young teams are starving to get a young QB. And if they're willing to, I don't know, give up draft capital or current players, I think they would do it.
I mean, think about where the league's at right now. There's so many young, talented quarterbacks. Like, that's kind of the new movement, right? We saw Burrow go to the Super Bowl on a rookie contract. We saw Mahomes go to the Super Bowl on a rookie contract. We saw Jalen Hurts go to the Super Bowl on a rookie contract. That's almost like the new formula for winning, but it seems like that has now become like the norm. So that's what everybody.
Yeah, and there's also good young QBs on other teams too that haven't really gotten that far, but
that's true.
Yeah,
Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
Point is, though, that's what everybody's doing now. But it'll be interesting to see if we look back on this trade in 2 years. Is it going to be worth it? Because there's been a lot of times where those number one pick trade ups have not worked out. I mean, if you look historically, Rams trade up for Goff. Is that a win?
It almost was. It was close. They almost won a Super Bowl with
The
him.
Eagles traded up for Carson Wentz.
Yeah, kind of a similar situation.
It's like at best. I don't know if that's always the Mitch Trubisky was a trade up.
Yeah, not really.
Trey Lance was a trade up. Like there's a lot of really iffy decisions.
The Trey Lance one, I think we have to give one more year, but maybe that's just me.
Sure. But right now,
no.
I'm saying, well, this is going to be year 3, right?
This is it for that trade, yeah.
So,
especially when you have Purdy waiting in the wings.
Is it Purdy waiting in the wings though, or is it Purdy's spot?
Yeah, I actually would argue Purdy, I think, should win the job. If they were both healthy and if Purdy played like he did in training camp, like he did last year, I give it to Purdy.
Certainly.
It sucks. I mean, that's just how life works.
I certainly agree with you. But my point is, at the end of the day, these number one trade-ups do not always work. And the Panthers are taking a huge risk. Honestly, it's a swing for the fences, but if they hit a home run and they get their guy, then no questions asked. It was the right move. Getting a franchise quarterback is the thing you need to be successful. Realistically, when was the last time a team won with a bad quarterback?
I can't even think of one right
now. And don't say Peyton Manning for the Broncos. He's Peyton Manning.
Yeah, he's a great quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Can't really use that. Or, oh, yeah, Peyton Manning. Okay, yeah, it was Peyton Manning his last year, but still. You need a top-tier quarterback.
I think other people would say his brother, actually, Eli.
Okay, but Eli won 2 Super Bowls.
I know, yeah. So, I know. I'm just saying that's what other people might think.
Yeah. That's the thing. I don't know if that move is always worth it, but it honestly comes down to who you draft. And at the end of the day, we're going to see what the Panthers do. I cannot wait for the NFL draft. I'm very excited. I think there's going to be a lot of moves that go on in the lower rounds too. And there's honestly going to be, I think, a kind of like a reaching for quarterbacks because it seems like all those teams near the top, they're all focused on the quarterback situations. And also, too, the 3 quarterbacks who have their name thrown around close to the top, Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, they're all getting a lot of hype. A lot of hype.
Lots of hype.
And we'll have to see what happens with that. But there's still a lot of other stuff in the NFL too, Jeffrey.
Oh, there's a ton of moves. I mean, I don't know where you want to start, but
I mean, let's talk about your Eagles because I feel like that's the one thing we haven't mentioned. So Hargrave goes to the 49ers on a really big deal. So your best D lineman essentially got brought to what was already one of the best defenses in the NFL. The 49ers are really making sure to shore up that defense. And I think it's honestly because the Eagles O-line kind of kicked them around in the NFC Championship.
Yeah, and coming from an Eagles fan's perspective, it just hurts to lose someone like that. I mean, you could have expected us to lose him, but the fact that he went to the Niners, I mean, that's the one team that's kind of right there with the Eagles. I mean, to lose him to a rival in the same conference, I mean, that hurts. But yeah, the Niners defense, especially their D-line, just gets stronger. I mean, Hargrave, we know that he can get to the quarterback. I mean, he had, I think, 11 sacks last year, and he had a lot of QB hits as well. But you pair him with Nick Bosa and the others on that D-line, I mean, that's just going to be scary because you got to cover Bosa, but you also have to worry about Hargrave. And I didn't even mention the other linebackers they have, Fred Warner and company. I mean, good luck to all the O-lines facing the Niners next year because they're going to have a lot of people to deal with.
Certainly. And we also should mention when it comes to the Eagles, they have a lot of other moves they got to make. So they re-signed Brandon Graham, who took a nice team-friendly contract, which is good because they needed him in the run game.
Yeah, I mean, to get him back was huge. And I think all along you would think he would come back, but actually see him back is huge, especially now that you lost Hargrave, to have him kind of in there to put pressure on the QB and stop the run. That's huge.
Yeah, so then let's move on to the defensive backfield because that's a lot of question marks for the Eagles right now. The big news was Darius Slay might be getting traded.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he hasn't requested a trade, but they're allowing his agent to explore the idea of a trade. And he said that he wanted to come back next year because he is still under contract for next season, but he did say if the money's right and he could go elsewhere, he would do it. So it's a little alarming, I think, to Eagles fans that he could be moved because he's a top flight corner. I mean, you don't want to lose him, especially if you lose James Bradbury too, who's the other partner in the
But
secondary.
he's a free agent, unrestricted free agent, so he has his choice to go anywhere. Doesn't really seem like the Eagles are going to keep him.
Yeah, I think if I had to guess, he's probably going to walk because I would think he might want to get QB1, not QB1,
Cornerback
CB1 type money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think that that's what he's going to be looking for. But there's so many other things that they have to worry about too. And I didn't even mention CJ Gardner Johnson.
That's the biggest one, I think, out of all of them. Him and Slay are the ones that I feel like if you lose them, you kind of lose the whole fingerprint of the defense.
Yeah, and it's weird because originally the Eagles said that they were going to tag Gardner Johnson if they couldn't get a deal, but now they said they're not going to tag him. And obviously that deadline's passed. So I don't know what's going to go on there. I mean, they have to figure out the secondary because it could all blow up in their face and they could lose all three, or they could lose two of the three and they still have to rework some other parts. There's just a lot they have to figure out.
But they're making a push to keep CJ Gardner Johnson, and I think they should because he led the NFL in interceptions. He missed quite a few games. I think it was like 4 or 5, and he hurt his spleen, right?
I believe so.
It was a big injury. It was no joke, and he still played really good, I thought, when he came back, considering the injury. Now, the Eagles are going to have some coaching changes too, so it's going to be interesting how their defense is, different compared to last year or similar. But at the end of the day, he's still a very good player, and you want him on the roster. And I think he's the one, I would say, out of all three of those names that we mentioned, Bradbury, Slay, and CJ Gardner Johnson, I think he's the most important to keep.
Because he's also very versatile. He can cover one-on-ones, and he's good in the spy.
He also has played corner in the past, so it'd be interesting to see if they would maybe consider moving him there. And it's also worth mentioning the Eagles have a top 10 pick, which they could spend on a corner.
Which is rare considering that they were in the Super Bowl, but they got that pick in the one trade from
the Saints.
Yeah.
So not bad, really, for the Eagles. It's just kind of deciding, are you going to keep Slay? Can you afford to keep Gardner Johnson? And then all signs would point to you're probably going to look to replace Bradbury with that corner pick in the top 10.
I would think so,
and
too.
There's a couple corners that could be up there. Potentially a guy from Penn State. His last name's Porter, I believe. And then there's another.
Yeah, I don't remember his first name either.
Yeah, but he's not bad. And then also another gentleman from Illinois, Witherspoon. Those are kind of like the best corners, I'd say, in this draft. But also, you don't really know what Howie Roseman's looking at. Who's not to say that he would trade back even more if there's another guy that he thinks that he can get later on. I mean, if anybody's a master of trades on draft night, it's Howie Roseman. Look what he did last year. Found a way to get a first rounder from the Saints. Got AJ Brown. Was able to get Nakobe Dean, who's probably going to step in for TJ Edwards. By the way, we did not mention TJ Edwards signed with the Bears. But that was expected that the Eagles would let him go. And they obviously drafted Nakobe Dean last year, and he kind of filled in at times. And now they're kind of going to let him take the reins on that. But that was a draft pick that they made. So it's about developing the player.
Yeah, it's just scary, too. There's just so many changes going on. And you hate to see these players leave, but you would expect these players to leave just because they're going to get paid and you can't pay everyone. So you got to prioritize certain guys over others. But yeah, I'm curious what they're going to do in the secondary, though, just to get back to that. I don't know who they're going to pick and choose. I'm not sure if that's the right word for this, but I do agree that Gardner Johnson would probably be the guy that they're going to focus on the most. I would think Slay is probably second. It seems like Bradbury is a foregone conclusion to leave, but I think solidifying Gardner Johnson, keeping him in Philly for a little while would be nice because, like you said, he's played corner, and if they want to maybe sign a safety or draft a safety, they could just easily do that and move Gardner Johnson a corner. So I think that's a nice option to have. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff they have to figure out.
Yeah, and then I'm trying to think of what other big free agent moves. Really, the only other ones I guess would say were the Broncos.
I was gonna say, how about your Denver Broncos?
On the offensive line, they got Mike McGlinchey from San Francisco to play right tackle. We have needed a right tackle for so freaking long. Finally, we got one.
And for 5 years.
Yes,
that's a great deal.
5 years is a very long time.
It's a long deal.
But obviously, I'm sure that gives you the flexibility to move some signing bonus into those other years and take it off the cap. So that's good. He's a player who's going to be around for a while. Additionally, we also pick up Ben Powers, who played for the Ravens last year. He started every game. He was pretty good O-lineman for them, but he's a guard. And we needed that. We needed to rebuild the O-line. That's what the Broncos needed to do. And honestly, I'm excited about it because I thought O-line was one of our worst, without a doubt, worst areas of the team last year. You can also say quarterback and coaching. And I hope that we've improved our coaching by getting Sean Payton. And I see that we're making some moves to improve our line. But once again, I'll say it again for like the 100th time. I sound like a broken record. The team will only go as far as Russell can take them. If he doesn't play good, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think this is a good starting point to hopefully get Russell Wilson back to what he was. I think protecting him is number one. And I think it's good that Sean Payton kind of had input in the Ben Power signing because he did say that he likes the way he plays in his previous offensive scheme. So I would think that that could be a good match. I mean, that could be an easy transition for him. And McGlinchey's kind of a proven guy. And I know that they gave him a lot of money. I think it was 87.5 million. And that is a lot for an O-lineman. But I mean, we've seen him in the past. He's kind of a household name as far as offensive linemen go, offensive tackles specifically. So hopefully he can plug into the Denver O-line and kind of get back to what he was. Because I believe he played all 17 games last year. He kind of had injury problems a few years ago, but to see him out there for every game last year, I think that is an encouraging sign as well. Because I always prioritize availability. I think that's a very underrated thing, especially in football with only 17 games. So I think having him out there is huge.
And another move was just made by the Panthers. They got Von Bell from the Bengals, who was pretty good safety.
But not a bad move.
Yeah, I like that move too. They have an okay defense. They have a really good D line. Brian Burns, especially, probably their best player right now. But they also got J.C. Horn. Now they had Von Bell. With Ejiro Evero, I feel like that's a defense that can be successful in the NFC South. But ultimately, it comes down to the same thing, Jeffrey. What are the Panthers going to be doing at quarterback? And I would say now that number one pick becomes even more important because it looks like you have a defense who's solid. You got an offensive line that's capable of doing what it can do. You got some decent running backs who are able to, be successful on the ground. That was kind of their focus last year. Biggest question mark, though, is that quarterback position. Whoever's going to be coming in there, if they're successful, that could be a pretty good team.
Yeah, I think so. I think they really have to prioritize that number one pick because I don't think they want to second guess themselves on draft night. I think they have to do the research beforehand, and I'm sure they will. I mean, every team does it. I think when they have the number one pick, they definitely want to make sure they're getting the right guy and they don't want to mess it up. But I think especially that you traded up into that position, I think there's clearly someone there, or there might be 2 or 3 guys there that you really want. I think in this case, it's Stroud or Young. You just want to make sure that you want the guy that you think is going to be the best for your team. And I think they're going to do that. Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure that, I don't know, when they saw the opportunity, they're thinking, oh, we got to do this. We got to go up there, especially for a team like the Panthers. They're kind of in a rebuild mode and they got to, I don't know, start somewhere. So I think QB is obviously the best starting point.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Quarterback is the most important position, especially when you're a team who already has a good O-line, a respectable coach, and a good defense. Now just get that kid, whoever it's going to be, in there and get him some playmakers on the outside. I wouldn't be surprised if the Panthers are active in free agency too, to see maybe if they can get a wide receiver, maybe like a veteran guy, just somebody that he can throw the ball to. There's going to be guys available like Juju. I know he might stay with Kansas City, but the point is, you might have to overpay for that just to get some talent in the room, a la what the Jaguars did with Christian Kirk.
Exactly.
Sometimes you do have to overpay to just kind of get some talent in there for a young quarterback. We saw how well that worked out for the Jaguars, right? Like you got to give a young QB weapons. That's the thing. I mean, who were the most successful young QBs right away? It was the guys who had weapons. Justin Herbert, he had Keenan Allen, he had Mike Williams, he had Austin Ekeler. Joe Burrow, he had Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Joe Mixon. Now, the Panthers are okay at running back. They have Deontay Foreman. But the biggest question, I think, is receiver. And also, another important part, coaching. But I like Frank Reich, so I'm not really that concerned about that. But the point is, you get something to help whoever that young QB is. And the Panthers could be a team, in a couple of years, they might be able to turn their fortunes. But as we know, the NFL draft is very unpredictable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more when you say that the Panthers need weapons, especially after trading DJ Moore. And I think they know that going into this free agency period and the draft coming up in 2 months' time or so. But yeah, I think they just can't make the mistake that Jaguars did with Trevor Lawrence in his first season because he had no one to throw to. And you saw what the results were there. But you saw them go out in free agency and get Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram and others. And they were a playoff team. And I think they need to go down that route. And I think another team that needs to get weapons, you just reminded me just on this topic, I think the Bears need weapons. And they did get DJ Moore, so I guess that's a start.
Well, they got DJ Moore, they got Chase Claypool last year, and they have Darnell Mooney. You have a number 1 receiver, you have a number 2 receiver, and you have a number 3.
So it sounds nice.
Yeah. So I don't really, I think that's a lot better than where they were a year ago.
Yeah. I just think that, I don't know. You can't wait to do it. I think you need to do it when you can.
Well, DJ Moore to me, I've been on the record with this. I think he's one of the most underrated receivers.
He's very good.
He's very good. He's put up consistent stats, and he's never had a good quarterback in a while. But he's still
also had different quarterbacks every year.
Different coaches, different quarterbacks. Really hasn't been great, and he still puts up pretty good stats. I would think in a place that's predominantly offensive based right now with the whole Justin Fields scene, I think he could be successful. Really, though, the Bears' biggest question is their offensive line because they have some solid skill players. Khalil Herbert's also a nice running back piece that they had. But the question for them really is their defense and their O-line, which they still have a really lot of work to do.
No doubt. And I was going to ask before we go to break, we're going to go break in about a minute. I feel like we've covered most of these free agent signings. I don't know if there's any more that you want to bring up. I mean, we'll see about this whole Aaron Rodgers to the Jets thing, whether it's going to happen, whether it's not going to happen. We'll have to wait and see like the rest of us. But I think that's everything that I think I wanted to cover.
Oh, yeah, that was every single thing. We got it in there in a pretty decent amount of time. I think we're good enough to take a break.
Yeah, so we'll go to break very quickly. But on the other side, we will talk about the bracket that was revealed last night for the men's March Madness tournament that will be starting technically tomorrow, but I guess Thursday. But we'll get into all that after the break. So stay with us. We will be right back. Welcome back to WLOI, Loyola Radio, streaming online at WLOI.org and Campus TV channel 111.1. You're listening to After the Whistle with Jeffrey Bazzi and Jimmy Cody. We were talking about all the crazy NFL signings and trades and all that were happening over the last few hours. But now we're going to shift our focus to March Madness, and the bracket dropped last night, and there's a lot of chatter about who's going to win, who are the sleepers, who are the upsets.
How about who was snubbed?
And who was snubbed.
Rutgers Scarlet Knights were screwed by the committee. They had no business not being in. NC State had one quad 1 win. Rutgers had a lot more than one. Additionally, Penn State, who made it, Rutgers was 2-0 against them. Just because you make the championship game now means you get in. Who did they beat? Oh, wow, congrats, beat Michigan State. Nice job. Beat Ohio State, good job. They didn't beat anybody that great. I'm sorry. I just think that's absolutely ridiculous. You know who else got screwed too? Clemson. They went 2-0 versus NC State. They didn't get in.
Yeah, I think they got screwed too because they had one bad stretch and that kind of cost them too.
Yeah, and I get Rutgers wasn't playing that great in February, but they still beat some solid teams. They beat Northwestern on the road. They beat Michigan State.
And they're both 7 seeds. Yeah. I mean, there's other teams too. Arizona State, they were on the bubble. Nevada.
The Mountain West gets 4 teams in?
Yeah.
Come on. You're telling me those teams were better than Rutgers? I'm not buying it. I think that was absolutely ridiculous. And that was just really upsetting to me because I really thought Rutgers was going to be in, no doubt.
Oh, yeah, me too. I thought they were going to be in that, I don't know, 8-9 seed range or somewhere in there.
I expected anywhere from an 11 to an 8. But at the same time, I mean, for them to not be in at all, it's insane.
Yeah, there are a lot of quality wins.
They did. And honestly, here's probably what the downfall of their season was. Losing to Minnesota, losing to Nebraska. Those two and Seton Hall. Those losses look awful on paper, but really the Minnesota and the Nebraska ones killed them because they had no business losing to those teams. And that's really why they're not in the tournament, unfortunately. But at the end of the day, there's nothing that anybody can do. They probably should have won some of those games. They would have been clearly ahead of some of the teams who were ahead of them. It just sucks because Penn State finished behind them in the standings. They had virtually the same record as a lot of those other teams who made it, because you got to remember they got screwed on the Ohio State call, which technically in the tournament committee's eyes counted as a win, even though it counts as a loss for their conference record. So they are 1 game behind teams like Maryland and Michigan State. But that Ohio State loss, in the committee, they said they made an announcement, it counts as a win in the record of that, or in the eyes of them. But that still wasn't even enough to get them in, even though they had the same conference record as Maryland, Michigan State, Illinois, and a better one than Penn State, but they don't get in. I don't know. I just
Yeah,
think
it's
that's
just tough.
absolute baloney.
Yeah.
And I'm sick and tired of the committee always screwing Rutgers. Baloney.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks, but I feel bad for them because I really thought that they were in. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be a great tournament, and I'm very excited for the rest of the basketball. And the Rutgers is going to have their chance to prove whoever it is wrong in the NIT. But at the end of the day, you want to be in the main dance. That's where everybody wants to be. But it's still going to be a great tournament, and there's going to be a lot of great games. And let's get into it, Jeff.
All right, let's do it. So I think we will start in the South region. So we have Bama there at the number 1 seed, Alabama, that is. And then I think for this section, Jimmy, I actually think they have a pretty good draw. I mean, there's not really a team in that section that really scares me.
Arizona.
I mean, so I think they would be the one team, but they wouldn't meet them until the Elite Eight. I think Alabama's path to the Elite Eight is very light. I mean, there's not really a team there that I would be scared of if I were them. Like UVA is the 4 seed. I mean, they're like good, but they're not like great. You're looking at Baylor. Baylor is a good team. I mean, they can beat anyone, but they're also very inconsistent. So I don't know. I would still take Alabama over them, but I think Arizona is by far the biggest threat to Bama in that section.
I'll give you 2 teams who jump out at me. The first, Missouri. I think it's a 7 seed. That's going to be a tough out for some people. Like, I wouldn't look at them as such a bad team. This was a team that was ranked not that long ago. So
Yeah.
for them to be a 7
They
seed,
snuck in the top 25 at the
yeah,
end.
I'm very surprised that they were a 7 seed. I actually could see them being a little bit higher than that.
Um,
Secondly, the other team that I want to mention, I think Virginia. I know they didn't really look that great against Duke, but they're still a pretty solid basketball team, and they play kind of a brand of basketball that works in March. Good defense, good fundamentals, looking for open shots, and they've won before. They have an excellent coach. I mean, listen, those are the things that matter, right?
and the one thing that they have this year that they really haven't had in a few years is they have guys who can make shots on the outside. And they've been consistently ranked, I think, around number 10 to 15, kind of all year. They've kind of been cruising along. I think they're a very interesting team. I think they can make a deep run.
Certainly, I agree with that.
The interesting thing about the South, I think there's a lot of potential upset picks that I've seen. I'm looking at San Diego State and Charleston, Virginia and Furman. I've seen people like Furman. And then I've seen people even take UC Santa Barbara over Baylor. I mean, there's just a tough section there because, I don't know, you take one upset and then you could see one of those teams getting maybe to the second weekend. I don't know. If I had to pick one, I don't know. I've heard a lot of talk about Charleston. I don't know if I'm buying it just because I think San Diego State's actually pretty good. I mean, they've been ranked a few times this year. Actually finished the season ranked, I believe. They won the Mountain West, I believe it was. I'm not sure about Furman, but UCSB, they can make a run. I would think there's a chance that one of those 3 could win. I'd bet my money that one of those 3 will win.
I pick UC Santa Barbara.
Okay.
That's who I would pick. Not for any particular reason. It's just that the Baylor and the Big 12, they had their moments, but then they had their non-moments. And I don't really know what I'm going to get at.
Yeah.
It's
and
like some nights they look like a pretty good team, but this is March, baby. Anything can happen.
yeah, and we've seen them not only win the whole thing in 2021, but they've lost first round once or twice. The whole
They lost
rebounding
last
meme
year.
thing. Yeah. They have Keontae George and Adam Flagler and other guys who can make shots. Just can you get help from the others? I think so, but it's not always dependable. Yeah, I could see the Gauchos from UC Santa Barbara making a surprising upset there.
I wouldn't be surprised too if NC State beat Baylor or beat Creighton. If
Okay.
NC State won that game, I would not be that surprised. I know their record, like I mentioned, they only had their one quad one win. But really, who is Creighton that really makes them so much of a better team over NC State? I don't really think they stand out that much compared to them. I think it's going to be a complete dogfight.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Creighton all year, they've been kind of, I don't know, hovering around the upper/mid tier of the Big East. I mean, they're not really on the UConn or Marquette tier, but they're kind of in that second tier. I mean, they're like a decent team. I don't know, they play together. It's just, I don't know. I think that's pretty even matchup too.
Yeah, and they don't stand out to me that much though compared to some other 6 seeds. But definitely the team that I'm most interested would probably be Virginia. I think that they definitely have what it takes to possibly go on a run. And if they do match up against Alabama at some point, I think that would be a really tough out for Alabama. I do definitely will say I think far and away Alabama is the most talented team on in that section. But they're still gonna have their work cut out for them because there's some sneaky teams in there. Specifically, I like Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I had to pick a winner of that region, I think I'd take Bama. Um, it's tough because I think Arizona is right there too. You mentioned UVA, and we haven't really talked about Baylor, and Baylor is a 3 seed, but I don't know. It's very hard to, I don't know, get back to the title game, especially after winning it 2 years ago. And that will be the challenge this year for, why am I blanking on who won it last year?
Kansas.
Kansas. That's gonna be a challenge for Kansas. Can they get back to the title game after winning it last year? I think that's a fair question to ask. But yeah, I think Bama, to answer your question, they're far and away the best team in that region.
Sure. All right, so moving on to the East now. Purdue's number one. Listen, I'm not this big Purdue guy. I think they're a team that can be beat. Edie's a nice player, but the rest of the team doesn't do anything for me. They really don't. They don't move the needle. I mean, when they're shooting, okay, it's a decent team when they're making shots, but can you hang your hat on that every game? I don't think so. I mean, Edie's pretty much the end all be all for them. I feel like the entire team revolves around him, but they're going to still need others to step up, and they don't always get that out of them. They don't.
Yeah, their problem is they turn the ball over a lot. And a big storyline too with Edie. Listen, he's so dominant just because of his size. You give him the ball, he's going to score more often than not. I think for Purdue, if he gets into foul trouble, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
If he gets 2 fouls early in the first half, he's got to sit for a big chunk of the first half, and he can't really play much in the second half if he picks up another foul. I mean, that's huge. You got to rely on those outside guys. And I don't know, when you have a guy that dominant, I think sometimes the other guys kind of not take Edie for granted. Sometimes you actually have to make shots and do your part. So they're an interesting team. I feel like all the 1 seeds, I don't know what gets the other 2 1 seeds later, but the 1 seeds, wow, they've been
They're
pretty good
vulnerable.
all year. They definitely are vulnerable. I mean, you could say the same about any team, but I think especially the 1 seeds this year.
Yeah. So looking at the rest of the East, that 8-9 matchup, Florida Atlantic going up against Memphis. So Florida Atlantic's a pretty good team. They've been ranked for most of this year. Would not disrespect them as a 9 seed. If I'm going to be honest with you, I actually think a little underranked.
You think so?
Yeah, I was surprised they were a 9. But this, I honestly think that this corner of the bracket here in the East might be the toughest because you got a very good Florida Atlantic team, like I just said. Memphis playing well right now. How about Duke? I mean, they have been on fire recently. I mean, I don't want to give them credit because I hate the school, but like, geez, they are playing.
They've
really
been
well.
on fire. They
And
just ran through the
not
ACC
to
tournament.
mention, you got Kentucky and Tennessee who are dog fighters from the SEC. And oh yeah, Kansas State is in there too with Michigan State, Marquette. That is going to be an absolute bloodbath section. I could see a lot of upsets that coming from there. Honestly, frankly, whoever makes it out of there possibly could have what it takes to win the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm looking here at the first round matchups. You think Purdue would win their game? Memphis FAU is kind of a
Toss up
there. The Duke Oral Roberts game, I think by far is the game that I'm looking at in that region because we've seen Oral Roberts in the past make some runs.
Oh, we have.
I mean, last year they made it to
It was 2 years ago.
or 2 years ago, they made it to the Sweet 16 and as a 15 seed. So, I mean, we've seen them make some noise and we saw a 15 seed make it to the Elite Eight last year. And they still have Max Asmus, who is one of the most electrifying scorers in the league or in college basketball this year. And I don't know if this would have happened, but it could happen in the second weekend. If Purdue matched up with Oral Roberts, that'd be Zach Edey, who's 7'4", against Oral Roberts' 7'5" center.
Wow.
I forget his name, but he's 7'5". That
heck of a battle.
hell of a matchup.
Heck of a battle. I mean, let's like we're saying before, that is going to be a bloodbath of a section. So who would be your pick to come out of there if you had to pick someone? I'll make mine. I'm telling you right now. I think that there is a chance that we see Duke make a run.
I think there is a good chance. I mean, they're really hot. And we always talk about this on the show, especially you. You've brought it up over the last few years. Teams that are hot right before the tournament, they carry that over into the tournament. And this is the team that's doing it.
I'll go one step further. The best teams, if you look historically over the last 20 some odd years, the best teams who advance the farthest are teams who have done well in their conference tournaments. You need to make the semifinals of your conference tournament realistically to be a chance to have a chance at a national championship. Like that is just a standard over the last couple of years that no team has been there, and not last couple, the last 20. So you need to play well in the conference tournament.
Yeah.
And they fit that profile right now.
So this is the section I've been having trouble with as I've been filling out my bracket yesterday and today. I had Kansas State originally, but I've been tempted to switch it to Marquette. I really like how Marquette's playing right now. I mean, they look really good in the Big East tournament. And I think that's another team that you can't really ignore either. And the other thing with Duke is I actually have them losing first round. So that's also my other reasoning. But
No,
I
listen,
don't know.
Oral Roberts.
I went off the rails there with that pick.
Listen, I wouldn't be surprised if a team like Memphis or Florida Atlantic went on a run. They're both playing really great ball right now. I mean, Florida Atlantic had 31 wins this year.
It's a lot of
That's
wins.
a lot of wins, and they're a pretty good team. They've been getting their credit all year. They took care of business in Conference USA. I mean, there was a really good team in Conference USA in addition to them, UAB. They were able to take care of business in the championship and win. Because there was a chance that they didn't, that they might have not made it because, it's Conference USA. It might only be a one bid league. Now, they were still a really good team all year, so they would have kind of gotten screwed if had they not gotten. One is they took care of business when they needed to, and UAB played pretty good in the tournament last year. So they're a team that had potential coming into this year. And Florida Atlantic was better than them. They did what they had to do, and that's a team that I think could make a run. Whoever wins that game, I think is going to be really tough for more than likely Purdue in the first round.
Yeah, I think so. So we go to the Midwest really quick.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think this region is kind of been under the radar. I don't think there's too many storylines here, but there are a few. I mean, you look at the top seed in this region, it's Houston, and Marcus Sasser is the storyline here. He was injured in the American Athletic Conference tournament, but he is going to be healthy for their game against Northern Kentucky on Thursday. That has been said by the team. So that's great news for Houston. I mean, he's their best player. He's the point guard. I mean, that's huge for them. And you look at the other teams in the region, and there's a few that stand out. I mean, Texas is the other team. They're the 2 seed. I think they're going to be a very popular pick to not only get out of the region, but probably win the whole thing. Xavier's a pretty decent 3 seed. Indiana's been a pretty solid team all year. They're the 4. And you look at Miami, who's the 5. But I'm looking at this region overall. I think as if you go a little deeper, I think the teams that might stand out at the end. I mean, I think it's going to be some combination of Houston and Indiana and Texas. I mean, I don't know if Xavier is going to make it that far. I don't know. I just don't think they're like great.
I would not be surprised if they lost first round.
Yeah,
really,
I think they play Kennesaw State.
They do play Kennesaw State, but my point is they just look so bad in that big game versus Marquette in the Big East Championship. They did not look good, and I expected a way better performance out of them. Granted, Sean Miller is a good coach. He's been there, done that in March. He can do what he can do. But they're going to have their hands full, and they're going to have to play a lot better. Now, I'll tell you who's a team I really like, actually. And this is a little bit of my anti-Big Ten bias coming out because I'm a little sour about Rutgers not getting in. Because we did beat this team. And I say we because I am a Rutgers fan because my brother goes there. But Indiana, they're going up against Kent State. Kent State can play. Kent State can play. I would not be surprised if Kent State beat Indiana. I really would not be shocked about that at all. And also, a lot of the games in this are going to be very tough. I think Penn State being a 10 against Texas A&M.
Yeah,
I don't think that's a good game for Penn State. I'll tell you that much. I think Texas A&M is far the better team in that one, and I'd be frankly shocked if they lost. But the Iowa State versus possibly Mississippi State or Pitt, I would not be surprised if one of the 11 seeds won that one.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. Just considering Iowa State's kind of been in free fall the last month or so.
I mean, it's like they've had their moments where they look good.
It's funny because a month ago, if we're having this conversation, I think Iowa State would probably be, I don't know, maybe a 4 seed. They were a pretty decent team, especially in the Big 12. The Big 12 is a loaded conference at the top. But right now, I don't really have too much confidence in them. I think I'd probably take my chances with the 11. And also, I think it might depend on who the 11 is. But there are some interesting games right off the bat in that region. But as you go deeper into the region, I think one of those teams at the top, you're looking at Houston, Texas, Xavier, Indiana, etc. I think one of those teams is going to stand out. And I'm not sure if you made a pick on who's going to come out of that region, but I like Texas. I just think they have so many weapons offensively. You're looking at
they're finally playing
Marcus Carr, Serge Ibaka-Rice. We'll have to see if Timmy Allen's healthy, but they have Dylan Dessou and other guys. They just have so many guys who can score 15 to 20 points. And I think if you have 3 or 4 of those guys, it's so hard to stop. And I know they went through that coaching change earlier in the year, but I think they've kind of settled in with the new coach. And I think they have enough offense to get to the Final Four. So I would take Texas in that region.
I like Texas too. I would.
And I know they've had trouble in the past with getting out of the first or second round with March Madness, namely in the Shaka Smart era. So we'll see. There's definitely some past history that they're probably not going to forget about.
They're playing the best ball right now. That's what they have going for them. And they're going up against Colgate, so I kind of hope they really play it off first round. I would like to see Colgate
Right.
destroyed, obviously. But there's a lot of really solid teams in this area of the bracket that I think can win. So Texas is going to have, if they have a second round match against Texas A&M, that is going to be insane. Two in-state rivals in the round of 32. And listen, they used to be in conference rivals. Remember when they were both in the Big 12? I mean, there's not a lot of love lost between Texas A&M and Texas. And I would not be surprised if Texas A&M run that game. So realistically, this might be like the Texas bracket because we also have Houston.
So I was going to say, if Houston gets the Elite Eight, if they get that far and they get to playing Texas in the Elite Eight, that'd be a showdown. Also, I'll go a step farther. If Houston were to make the Final Four, that'd be crazy too, because the Final Four is in Houston.
That is kind of cool.
That would be a massive home crowd for Houston.
Yeah, but some other contenders in this bracket too. Don't underestimate a team like Drake going against Miami. I mean, Miami.
Yeah.
I thought there was a chance that they could have made a better run in the ACC tournament. They kind of ran into Duke, but they're again a team who lost recently. They're going to be coming off a little bit of a break. Drake just won their conference.
And the other troubling news for Miami is their third best player. I forget his name, but he's injured, so I'm not sure if he's going to play. Too. And he's their number one rebounder and third leading scorer.
That line is small too. Like it is not a big line at all.
So, you could sing it swing even more if that guy's hurt and he's out.
Well, that's probably an indication that he won't be.
Yeah.
So could be a nightmare for Miami then. And they got that Iowa-Auburn game. Iowa just not. Again, that is a team that I hate seeing in because I know Rutgers lost to them and whatnot. But at the end of the day, they didn't really play that well near the end of the season. I think they're a team that could easily get stomped out here. I mean, we saw what they did against Richmond last year. I mean, they were just, or not. I don't know if they lost to Richmond. Did they lose to Richmond?
I felt like they did.
I think they did lose.
I think you're right.
But they were coming off of a pretty successful Big Ten tournament. And God, they just fell apart pretty hard. So it's going to be a question mark for Fran McCaffery. Can you move past the first round troubles? I don't know. We'll see. Anything else to add about the Midwest?
No, I don't think so. I think that's going to be a really tough region, though, because there's a lot of teams that are really good in that region that you can make an argument for.
Certainly. All right, let's move on to the West now. We got Kansas as the number 1 overall seed. We got UCLA as the 2. That's kind of the big names in there. We also have Gonzaga in there as a 3. After that, after that, I think there's a little bit of a drop off because I'm not the biggest fan of the UConn team, but I would be very shocked if one of those 3 did not advance.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking here. I think there's not really much upset potential. I could see VCU knocking off St. Mary. I think VCU is a very dangerous team as a 12.
Absolutely. In that game's, look at that. Albany, New York. St. Mary's has to fly the complete across and up the country. That's going to be a tough fight for some college kids. That's just so easy.
Lose the 3 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not that easy. And also, too, how about Iona getting a 13 seed? Rick Pitino is going to be going up against an old Big East foe. I don't know. Don't come out and count against Rick Pitino and the Iona Gibbs.
I wouldn't count them out either.
They've put up some solid performances in years past.
They really have. I mean, sometimes they can just shock the world out of nowhere. I mean, it's any given day, especially in this tournament. But yeah, I'm looking at the overall landscape of this roster. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think Kansas is going to get out of it. I think they could. I mean, they've had a pretty solid year, but I feel like they're very dependent on Jalen Wilson. Jalen Wilson's a great player. I mean, he's a top 5 player in the country. It's just, if he's having those off days, I mean, you've seen him have 2 points in a few games this year, and it's just hard when you have your best player have single-digit points and you have to rely on the others. I just don't know if they're going to get enough help. And I think if they run into a team, I think Arkansas could maybe knock him out in the second round. I wouldn't count out Eric Musselman and his team. I mean, we've seen them have pretty good teams.
They're a younger team, though. They're not the Arkansas team from the couple of years ago. They're not last year's team.
That's why I think UConn could be that team to knock him out. I think UConn is a very good team. I actually have them in the Final Four.
You have them advancing further than UCLA? You really think UConn's better than UCLA?
I don't, but I just think, I don't know. I think the way they're playing right now, I don't know. Neutral site, I take my chances. I think they play more together than UCLA.
Certainly. I'll say this.
UCLA is very dangerous.
UCLA is very dangerous. They've been on runs before. Mick Cronin can flat out coach. Jaime Jaquez has been there, done that. So is Tiger Campbell. I realistically would say I'm going to put it out there now. I think that they make the Final Four.
Okay.
I think they.
I could see it. I could totally see it. I think the other trouble for UCLA, and I think this team's actually being slept on. I know they're a big name, but I think they're kind of going in and sleeping. Is Gonzaga.
Well, also how about TCU? Like they've been playing better too. Like that's not going to be an easy out for Gonzaga when they have to play them. Granted, if they can get past the Arizona State Nevada game,
Yeah,
who's some of the last four in amongst those teams. The point is, those are a couple teams that are going to be difficult. I mean, we saw Arizona State hang in there with some Pac-12 opponents this year. They're not a bad team.
no, not at all. And I think for TCU, if Mike Miles is on, I mean, he can really let it go. He can score with anyone. I think he could really carry TCU. But then I can also see them losing first round because they've had some duds this year.
Certainly.
It's just, I don't know, there's so many pros and cons to every team.
That's why I feel like UCLA, I just can count on them a little bit more than I can count on some of these other teams because I really feel like they haven't thrown up that many duds.
No, they really haven't. And I think
like the games they lose on a buzzer beater, Arizona. Okay, whatever. It's conference championship. It is what it is. Both teams are going to be there.
Yeah, they've really handled the conference for the most part.
Exactly. So I feel like I can give them a green check of approval.
Yeah.
In that way.
I think their one trouble spot would be if they had to play Gonzaga in the Sweet 16. I think it'd be a very tough game. And I think they could win.
But that's going to be a tough game regardless.
Yeah.
So,
Gonzaga would definitely have payback on their mind from 2 years ago.
But listen, let's also not act like Gonzaga is a team who has come in and always been successful in the tournament. They're a team who has faltered many times.
Right.
And they've certainly had better rosters than this one.
They definitely have. I think maybe being a 3 could help them because they're not really getting a lot of attention.
No,
because they've been the number 1 overall seed in the past 2 years.
No, they're not, but they've lost the worst teams in those years. I think they're going to have some tougher competition.
And they've had games where they've barely snuck by too.
Yeah, certainly.
And that's the one thing with Mark Few. I mean, he's a great coach. They haven't really gotten it done in March.
If they win that first round matchup, any of those 3 teams they could possibly play.
I mean, Northwestern could sneak up on them in the second round.
That's additionally true as well. No, they would play Northwestern in the round of in the Sweet 16 because Northwestern.
I'm thinking of UCLA.
Yeah. UCLA would have to play the winner of, if they win, of course, versus UNC Asheville, would be Northwestern and Boise State. So the point is for them is getting past one of those 2 teams. But that's going to be a tough matchup for Boise State and Northwestern because they're both running into each other, and their teams are very similar with each other. Obviously, in terms of record, I know Northwestern did well in the Big Ten this year. They ended up finishing second in the regular season. But they were a team to me that I felt like kind of slipped up at some time. So I definitely wouldn't count out Boise State just because of the fact they're from the Mountain West.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, I don't know, potential good games that we could get. Hopefully we get a lot of them or all of them. But yeah, I don't know. Who do you have? I don't know if you picked your Final Four.
I have not picked my Final Four yet.
Is there one team that you like over the others?
Post that we'll put out there because I'm not entirely sure. Because I'm going to be honest, I have not filled out a bracket yet.
Okay, I have a Final Four, but it's tentative. I definitely know that Alabama and Texas will be in my Final Four. I'll say that on the record.
Well, UCLA would probably be one of my picks right now.
Okay, yeah, I've been thinking about putting them in because UConn would be my team from that region right now, but I have Kansas State as the other team from the other region, so I might change that because I really like Marquette.
It's a very exciting time of year. There's going to be a lot of great basketball to be played, and I know that we're going to be very excited. And we're going to look forward to Friday's show, which will be in the middle of the tournament. It will be in the middle of day 2. And we'll be able to talk about what happened day 1. Maybe while we're here, hopefully I can, nail another live bet like I gave out 2 years ago when I told everyone to bet Arkansas and over Colgate. So that's always fun too, just to watch Colgate lose when they were down. So hopefully we'll have another fun show with that.
Definitely.
It's going to be a very fun time of year. To everybody listening, I hope you enjoy the tournament. I hope you have a great time filling out the brackets. Are we going to do a tournament challenge or have we decided on that?
We could.
We could. All right. I'm down to
Me too.
If we want to, we could definitely do that. All right. So anything to add?
No, I think it's gonna be a great tournament. It starts tomorrow with the first 4, but the real good action gets underway on Thursday. So stay tuned for that. But thank you as always for listening to the show. We appreciate your time and we will be back on Friday talking some March Madness and more sports. So stay with us. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you on Friday.